People move to Vancouver, spend 7 figures on a home, and only after they close do they realize how many traps they walk straight into. Hidden taxes they didn't budget for, building issues they didn't know existed, and market dynamics that are completely different from where they came from. So in this video today, I want to walk you through some of the biggest things that consistently blindside buyers here, so you're not learning this the hard way after you've wired your life savings away. So let's start with one of the biggest landmines in the current market: new construction versus pre-sale construction. For years in Vancouver, buying pre-sale felt like a no-brainer. You put your deposit down, the building gets built over a few years, and when it completes, the unit is worth more. That worked in an environment where prices were ripping higher and higher, interest rates were low, and people were lining up around the block to throw money at towers that didn't exist. That is not the environment we are at now. Land costs have jumped, construction costs have jumped higher, and developers need to hit certain price points just to make the project viable. That means a new product is coming to market at a big premium over comparable resale inventory. So you'll see older but solid concrete buildings selling in that roughly $1,000 to $1,100 per square foot range, while new projects next door are asking $1,500 to well over $2,000 a foot just to make the numbers work. On top of that, new construction means GST. You're paying 5% GST on the full purchase price plus property transfer tax on the full amount as well. So if you're buying a $1.2 million new condo, 5% GST is about $60,000 and PTT is another chunk on top. You can be $80,000 to $100,000 in tax before you've even furnished the place. Keep in mind there are some incentives for first-time home buyers, but if you are not one, you are going to have to pay that tax. In a flat or declining market, which we are in, that math just does not make sense. If values pull back or just sit still, you can very easily find yourself underwater on day one. And you're also competing with the developer's unsold inventory and with other owners trying to exit at the same time. If you're buying pre-sale because you assume it always goes up, you are walking right into the new construction trap that so many people have fallen privy to. Now, tied directly into that is the tax side of Vancouver real estate. And this is where out-of-town buyers get hammered. On every purchase in BC, you're paying property transfer tax. The structure looks like this: 1% on the first $200,000, 2% between $200,000 and $2 million, and 3% between $2 million and $3 million. Add an extra bump above that, which means anything above $3 million is effectively taxed at 5% on that top slice. On a $2 million purchase, your property transfer tax bill alone is already massive. If it's a new home, you're stacking 5% GST on top of that. For most buyers, that's not an inconvenience. That's the difference between we can do this and we cannot. Then there are the ongoing and special taxes nobody calculates properly up front. If you own a property here and it's considered vacant or a second home under certain rules, you may be dealing with the BC speculation and vacancy tax, where the rate depends on your residency and use based on your BC assessment value. The Vancouver empty homes tax if the property is inside the city of Vancouver and is deemed vacant for more than 6 months of the year. These are not one-time penalties. They can hit you every single year the property is considered vacant under these rules. Add in the BC home flipping tax, which targets properties sold within 2 years of purchase. If you sell in year 1, the province wants up to 20% of your profit. In year 2, the rate declines but doesn't disappear. It's aimed squarely at short-term flipping, and it absolutely changes the math if you're thinking, we'll just buy, try it out, and if it doesn't work, sell in a year. If you don't know these numbers before you write an offer, you're guessing. And guessing at this price level is very, very expensive. The next thing that blindsides people: what kind of homes people actually live in here. In a lot of Canadian or US markets, the default picture in your head is a detached house with a yard. You move to the city, you buy a house in the city, that's the goal. But in Vancouver, that's not how most people live. Detached homes are the minority of the housing stock here. The majority of people live in condos, townhomes, duplexes and half duplexes, or other types of multifamily forms. In many Vancouver neighborhoods, a basic livable detached house will run you somewhere in that $2 million to $5 million range, depending on the area and lot size. That's just the reality of the value of land here. So if you arrive with a mindset, we must own a house and it must be in the city of Vancouver, there is a very high likelihood the market is going to say no. The people who actually get into the market here are the ones who are willing to say what combination of location, commute, lifestyle, and property type actually works for the budget we have. That might mean a condo or a townhouse in a fantastic location instead of stretching to the absolute edge for a teardown on an extremely busy street. And that leads straight into the next blind spot. You do not need to be inside the city of Vancouver boundaries to have a great lifestyle. Metro Vancouver is a region of more than 3.5 million people with over 20 municipalities. The city of Vancouver itself is about 110 square kilometers and roughly 750,000 people. That means most people in Vancouver do not technically live in Vancouver on paper. There are suburbs such as Burnaby, North Vancouver, Coquitlam, Richmond, Delta that are effectively part of the same urban fabric. The line where Vancouver stops and Burnaby starts is arbitrary for day-to-day life. In other parts of Canada, those areas would be likely amalgamated into one city. Here, they're carved out as separate municipalities. So if you arrive thinking if it doesn't say Vancouver on the address, it's a compromise, you're going to miss out on some strong options that actually match your budget and lifestyle a lot better than trying to wedge into the city of Vancouver at all costs. Now, if you're moving here with kids or planning to, school and childcare is another area where people get blindsided. In many other markets, buying into a certain school catchment is basically your ticket into that school. Here, that is not guaranteed. A lot of Vancouver schools are oversubscribed, limited physical space, higher density in the surrounding neighborhoods, and not enough capacity for every child who lives within the map lines. So you can buy in a good catchment, enroll your child, and still end up being directed to another school because the one you planned on simply doesn't have room that year. Often families eventually get into their homeschool later as spots open up, but it's not something you can treat as automatic from day one, so it's important to do the research. Before school age, daycare is a whole separate battle. Access to daycare spots here is tight and you're dealing with long wait lists, the need to apply early and widely, and constant follow-up just to stay visible. If you have kids or you're going to have kids, this isn't background noise. It affects where you should live, what your daily schedule looks like, and how far you can realistically be from work. For my case, my son finally got into a daycare a year before kindergarten, and we had him on lists while my wife was pregnant. So it is a long battle. If you're thinking of moving into a specific area, make sure that you're putting your name on lists on daycares because it is very, very difficult to get a spot. If you're looking at detached houses in Vancouver or older areas of the region, there's a uniquely local issue that needs to be on your radar. Underground oil tanks. Decades ago, a lot of homes here were heated with oil stored in buried tanks. When the city transitioned to gas and electricity, many of those tanks were never removed. Some were decommissioned on paper by pumping most of the oil out and filling it with sand, but not all of it. Fast forward 50 to 60 years, tanks corrode, oil and water leak out, and soil becomes contaminated. Under local rules, if you're an owner and there's a tank on your property, you are responsible for the following: locating and removing that tank, remediating any contaminated soil that could run in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. If your lot is sloped and the oil has migrated under neighbors' properties, that responsibility can extend beyond your fence line. The bill for proper remediation can move from annoying to a mid-six-figure territory in bad cases that can change your financial capabilities for years to come. And this is why oil tank scans and proper due diligence are not a luxury when you're buying a house here. They're a non-negotiable. You need to know what's in the ground before you decide that Q character home is the one. Condos and townhomes have their own local landmine, leaky condo era construction, and rain screening. Buildings construction roughly between the early 1980s and the late 1990s sit in that higher risk window. The building envelope systems used back then did not always perform well in our climate. Poor drainage and ventilation meant water could get in and stay in, and over time that leads to rot, mold, and massive repair bills. The modern fix is rain screen technology. They install a proper air gap behind cladding, proper drainage and ventilation designed for continuous wet weather. If a building from that older era hasn't been rain screened and starts to show envelope issues, the cost of rehabilitation is not theoretical. It falls directly on owners through special levies. You can be looking at tens of thousands of dollars per unit, and in some extreme cases, bills well into the six figures per door. Two condos can be the same size in similar locations with similar prices. One is in a fully rain-screened, well-managed building. The other is an original envelope 1990s structure with upcoming work. On paper, they look interchangeable, but in real life, one of them can wreak havoc on your finances if you don't know what you're buying. That's why you dig into the depreciation reports, the engineering reports, the strata minutes, and you work with someone who actually knows how to read them and identify them. Finally, there's a piece a lot of relocation buyers underestimate: how different parts of Metro Vancouver actually feel to live in, down to the microclimate. Everyone has heard Vancouver is rainy. That's true compared to a lot of Canada, but it's not one uniform climate. Some areas get roughly double the rainfall the city of Vancouver does. Other pockets get noticeably less rain, more sun, and slightly different temperature patterns as well. That variation lines up with differences in elevation, proximity to the mountains or open water, and exposure to wind and cloud cover. Weather is just one lens. The same pattern holds for culture, amenities, density, noise, and access to parks and trails. The reality on the ground in, say, East Vancouver versus North Vancouver, even versus South Delta, is very different, even though they are all part of Metro Vancouver in casual conversation. If you choose purely off a map and a price without understanding how those differences play out day to day, you can end up in a technically good purchase that doesn't match your actual lifestyle or tolerance for rain, traffic, or noise. The bottom line is this: Vancouver can be an incredible place to live and own real estate, but it's not a simple plug and play market. New construction, pricing, tax layers, school capacity, oil tanks, leaky condo era buildings, and hyper-local differences all matter here. If you're planning a move or a purchase and you want to pressure test your assumptions before you commit, feel free to reach out, and I'm happy to walk you through how this actually looks like in your price range and with your priorities, so you're not one of the people calling me after the purchase saying, "We had no idea." You can book into my calendar using that QR code in the banner, or there's a link to my calendar in the description below. Thank you again for your time, and I hope to see you in the next one.